Today I'm going to show you how to make a very special and spooky Halloween treat, witch cupcakes. They actually have like a full witch face and a pretty cool witch hat that's filled with a surprise inside, children's bones, and candy, mostly candy. Okay, let's get started. To make the brim of our witch hat, we're gonna make some delicious chocolate sugar cookies. Okay, first step is to cream 1 cup or 225 grams of unsalted butter at room temperature. All right, now let's add that 1 cup of granulated sugar in. Let it mix until it's nice and light and fluffy. 1 egg. Let's scrape the bowl down. Add that 1 teaspoon of vanilla, teaspoon of almond extract. I'm gonna add all of my dry ingredients into one bowl, give them a whisk, and then sift into my wet mixture. Starting with the 2 cups of all-purpose flour and 1/2 of a teaspoon of salt. 3/4 of a cup of cocoa powder. 1/4 of a cup of cornstarch, a magical ingredient that gives you no spread cookies. Okay. Whisk it up. All right, now we're gonna sift this in to our bowl. Whisking over a sifter is the easiest way to not make a mess. Paddle attachment back on. Okay. I was expecting a cloud. Okay, all good. Look at that beautiful dough. Oh my gosh, so rich and chocolatey. Really delicious. All right, I'm transferring my delicious chocolate cookie dough to a silicone pastry mat. It'll make it really easy to release. Dump it out. And I'm gonna be rolling it with some plastic wrap because I don't want any messiness. Okay, dough is rolled. Just a preliminary roll though, because we're gonna transfer this to the freezer, let it chill, and then give it a final roll with perfect circle cuts. I'm rolling my dough out to 1/4 of an inch exactly. I'm using this special rolling pin, which I talk about in my Ultimate Baking Gadgets video, which you can click up here for. All right, now we're ready to cut our cookies out. And this is gonna depend on the size of cone you use, so take a look at your cones, take a look at your various circle cutters, and think, what would a witch wear? How big would her hat be? Or his hat, I guess. Anyways, so let's get to cutting and transferring this over so we can bake and assemble. Cut those cookies out, then transfer them to a baking sheet and pop into an oven, set at 350 for about 7 to 12 minutes depending on their size. So I'm making these pumpkin spice cupcakes that are a favorite of mine. They're so moist and spicy, and I love pumpkin in everything because I'm basic. Okay, let's get started. 1/2 cup of unsalted butter at room temperature into your standing mixer. Start by creaming it. I'm gonna add my 1 1/3 cup of brown sugar in. Okay, my butter and brown sugar are all nice and creamy, so now it's time to add in 2 room temperature eggs, 1 at a time while the mixer's on. Scrape that mixer down. Okay. All homogeneous, nicely mixed. Now let's sift our dry ingredients together. Into a large-ish bowl, you're gonna be sifting 2 cups of all-purpose flour, 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, 1/4 teaspoon of allspice, 1/4 teaspoon of cloves, 1 teaspoon of ginger, 1 1/2 teaspoons of cinnamon, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. All right, now let's sift it all together. Give it a whisk, and we're almost done. All we have to do now is mix our wet ingredients and then combine everything together. All right, so for our wet ingredients, we have 1/4 cup of sour cream, These cupcakes are so moist because of the sour cream and all that pumpkin. Speaking of pumpkin, 3/4 of a cup of pumpkin puree. And that, just so you know, is half a can or 7 ounces. Half a cup of buttermilk. Okay, 1 teaspoon of vanilla and a teaspoon of orange blossom water. I love orange blossom water because I love orange and pumpkin together. They're so great. But if you can't find it, just grate a little bit of orange zest into your batter and it'll be great. Give it a whisk. So the last step is going to be to add in your dry mixture and your wet mixture to your butter mixture in a few batches, alternating with the wet and the dry. You've probably done this 1,000 times, so I don't need to tell you that it doesn't have to be perfect. You're just trying to not dump all the dry mixture in at once. Oh, it smells great. All right, our batter's about done, but I just want to show you that you should always just finish it off by hand because you can really like fold in whatever's left at the bottom, and it gives you the most control over your batter. This is a beautiful color and I love the consistency, just right. We can use an ice cream scooper to apportion in an exact amount into each cupcake paper. The cupcakes will bake in an oven set at 350 for about 17 to 20 minutes or until the centers are nice and springy. Just so happen to have some black candy melt on hand, so I'm going to use that to make my witch hats dark and glittery. You're going to see how that works. But if you don't have candy melt, go ahead and just use regular chocolate, melt it down, and do the same technique I'm doing. So let's get some candy melt, smooth it on to our witch hat. And I'm going to tell you, you do kind of have to work quickly because the candy melt will cool with some speed, and once that happens, the glitter or the black sanding sugar won't stick. Okay, and then just kind of smooth away some of the excess before we go on to the next step, which is going to be to coat in black sanding sugar, which is really messy, so I should be wearing gloves, but I love making bad choices. You can see now I have a very witchy hat, which is going to go great with my brim once it's all assembled. Okay, that looks good to me. Super easy. Now just let it cool completely so it's nice and hard. Set aside, and then you'll assemble the next step. So our hat cones have cooled enough for me to handle them with gloves on because this black sanding sugar is messy. And I'm just going to fill them up with some candy, but first we're going to create a seal for the brim by dipping them in the candy melt. Just a little bit. Now, add those candies in and attach the hat's brim. Okay. Now we have our witch hat cookie. I might let this dry for a second and then just coat the brim with more candy melt and more glitter, and we're done. That's all set, and now we're gonna add the last bit of candy melt onto the brim and the last bit of sanding sugar too. Your goal is to cover the brim completely but not get messy or add too much so that you lose the definition of the hat. And I'm using a very small spatula to do that, but you could use a spoon or a small knife, anything is fine. And now let's spoon some of that sanding sugar on. Okay, that's one done. These witch hats look pretty good, but they're gonna look even better with a little band of color and a buckle. So to do that, I'm using the tiniest amount of fondant. I don't love fondant, but I do use it occasionally. I have one batch that's white and one batch that I've dyed purple, and I don't overmix it so it has a little bit of variation to the color because I think it makes it look more interesting. All right, let's use a tiny little ruler and a knife to cut it. It's always a good idea to let your fondant sit out when you're doing this for a bit so it's a bit more manageable and less wet. Okay, now all I have to do is take my band and wrap it around my witch hat. These hats look pretty nice, but a beautiful gold buckle will finish them all off. So let's make it with some fondant. I'm cutting out just little squares that I measured out. You shouldn't be cutting on your pastry mat like this, by the way. Doing it anyways. All we have to do now is cut the middle out, and for this I might use an X-Acto knife just to get a nice clean edge. I'm starting off by tracing it lightly, and then I'll go in for the kill. Okay, now we'll lift it off. So when you lift your little buckles off, it might get a little bit mangled. Don't worry about it. Just use your fingers to pinch it straight. The fondant's pretty sticky, however, it dries out. So I'm just gonna apply the smallest bit of water to reactivate that stickiness. And grab a little corner of my gold leaf. Okay. All right, and now we have one little gold buckle that'll go right onto our hats. Oh, that'll be a pain. After the gold leaf is set for a bit, you can handle the buckles and now just turn them over and brush the back with some water so they'll be sticky. And fix to the front of your hat. Now you're all done. Very witchy. Okay, so my cupcakes definitely need some buttercream, and I will be making a witch hairstyle of sorts. We'll see how good a coiffeur I am. Coiffeur? Coiffeur. Anyways, 3 sticks of unsalted butter at room temperature into my standing mixer fitted with a paddle attachment. Give it a little mix just to cream it up. All right, now we're gonna sift in 1.5 pounds or so of confectioner's sugar. I'm really looking out for the consistency because the hair might be an issue. You'll want to sift your sugar in several batches. So sift a little bit, mix, sift a little bit, mix. Otherwise it'll just be a giant cloud of sugar. Mix on low. Just gonna scrape the bowl down. Make sure to get buttercream all over your fingers. It really helps the process. I'm using some green food coloring and some black food coloring. The green is kind of like springy and bright and light, and I want it to be a bit darker and deeper and moodier. I could have worked in a salon. Once you've got the right shade of green, go ahead and reserve half of the buttercream. The rest will be dyed black. Add in a lot of black food coloring. That's not the whole bottle. And give it a good mix. This will be for the hair, black hair with a green face. It's not bad. And as you probably know, whenever you're dyeing something with food coloring, it will darken a bit as the buttercream dries out. So this looks like a beautiful pewter color, but it will turn more black. All right, now I'm filling my piping bag with my dark blackish hair buttercream. So for my beautiful witch's face, I'm gonna pipe some of this green buttercream on top, create a dollop and kind of sculpt the face a little bit. It doesn't have to be pretty, she's a witch. Now it's time to make these witches come alive. I'm using an 808 tip to pipe the face. If that green buttercream is a little bit wrinkly and crinkly, it's fine, they're witches. For the noses, I'm using a 125 tip turned around so the bulbous side faces out. You can use your fingers to manipulate the nose a bit and sculpt it if you'd like. Pop those candy eyes in. Now I'm using my large grass tip to pipe an unruly mop of hair, but you could do any hairstyle you'd like. Place the witch's hat on and your witch is ready to enjoy. All right, so it's not quite Halloween yet, and I'm not going to crunch these witch hats and like expose all the candy that's inside and like eat their faces, etc., etc. But you can do all of that when you whip up a batch. It's gonna be like a really cool Halloween treat. And by the way, if you want to save some time, or if you don't want to, if like candy eyes, where do I get them? They sell them at the supermarket. But if you can't find them, you could just make the witch hats, and they're amazing cookies that kids really like because they're basically like Halloween piñatas. All right, thanks so much for watching. Hit that like button, subscribe, and if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below.